Hello, everyone. Welcome to Ready, Set, Relaunch, a website success story. I am Laurel Bellman, and I will be moderating this session. Our presenters today are going to briefly introduce themselves, and then they will give their presentation, and then we're going to have some time at the end for Q&A. So please put any questions you might have in the chat, and I will read them out. Please note that we are recording this presentation, and an accessible video will be available for viewing on the IT Professionals Conference website sometime next week. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ellen Clark and Mahika Mohan. Sorry, I am having a morning with their presentation. So take it away, Ellen and Mahika.
Thanks, Laurel. So as it was said, we're here to share with you all how the Office of the Registrar redesigned and relaunched its website over a period of 2.5 years during COVID-19. We want to share how we were able to effectively redesign our website and manage to change through this large office-wide project that affects all of our key audiences, including students, faculty, and staff. While several of the ideas that we'll be presenting might not be novel, we did want to share with you how we applied them to our process and how they might be able to be applied to other processes as well. We have set aside time for questions at the end, so if you could just hold those or put those in chat, that would be great. So I'm Ellen Clark. I'm the communications specialist for the Office of the Registrar. My pronouns are she, her, hers. For those with limited, low, or no vision, I have middle length blonde hair. I'm a white woman. I am in my home office with a gallery wall of photos behind me and in a blue and orange patterned top.
Hi, everyone. My name is Mahika. I'm a student program coordinator in the Office of the Registrar, and I also did a communications internship with Ellen last summer. I use she, her pronouns, and I am a 20-year-old female with brown skin and black hair wearing a light pink collared top.
And Mahika won't say this about herself, so I will. She was the Student Employee of the Year this year for Innovation and Technology, largely based off of the work that she did as part of this internship. Okay, so today we're going to split our session up into 3 portions. We're first going to talk about the problem that we're addressing, the tools that we used to solve that problem, and then the lessons that we learned through the process. So first, the problem. In short, the problem we're solving is the effectiveness of our website. Our office provides many necessary services to several different audiences, and we wanted to improve how our audiences interacted with the main way we provide information, which is our website, to ensure that they were able to get the answers that they were looking for quickly and that our information was more concise and easier to understand. To solve this problem, we aimed at addressing accessibility issues and improving our poor user experience. For context, when I started in this position 4 years ago, the Office of the Registrar website was used as an example of what not to do in WISC-Web training when it came to menu navigation and other components. So I was really had a chip on my shoulder and was trying to get us out of the training as an example of what not to do. For the tools, we're going to split this up in half. I'll talk about the tools that I used and found beneficial as part of the entire website redesign and relaunch. And then Mahika will take the second portion and talk specifically about the project that she did, which was the homepage of our website. For some background, I started the website redesign project in March of 2020 with the intention of completing this project over the course of a year and in person. When the pandemic started, that meant we had to pivot and have the project transition to a virtual environment, as well as other projects that were happening because of the pandemic needing to take priority. And then these tools were developed and things that I learned out of need, but I have found use for them well beyond this one project, which is why I'm sharing them with you today. So I started the project by writing a proposal to gain buy-in and really justify that we needed this project to be done. But it also helped set the scope of the project and put limits on the changes that were being made. This redesign was not meant to completely reinvent what our website looked like. We were really reutilizing and recycling the information that existed on our website, but just presenting it in a different way. Another proposal was written about the project and was approved, and this one suggested page navigation or website navigation, excuse me, and page standards. This allowed our office leadership something clear and concise to react to, while also providing and approving the scope of the project. In the end, I ended up using the proposal throughout the process, not just at the beginning, to show the need and also justify the decisions I was making and say no to suggestions that I was getting that didn't fall within the scope or within the approved proposal. It also helped to reassure subject matter experts that their content wasn't going away, and because it was still within the scope of the project. The next thing I'll talk about is inventories. I created several different inventories, and I created them using spreadsheets, specifically Google Sheets. But really, you can use any platform that you want. The main goal of an inventory is to catalog and organize information that you're looking to collect. So there were two main inventories that I created and was consistently referencing both before, during, and I reference them today, even though the project has been done for over a year. I created a general inventory, which helped me understand the starting point and set realistic goals, and provided a reference point for information that was going to be transitioned. This inventory included page URLs, the page titles, which organizational team in our office the information belonged to, any links that were on those individual pages, and screenshots and resources that were also on those pages. I also created a change inventory, and this documented what was happening to every existing page that we had. So whether it was being consolidated with another page, whether it was being completely removed, turned into a form, turned into a knowledge-based document, or left as is, I documented that in a spreadsheet. This specifically helped me well after with many redirects. And again, like I said earlier, ensuring subject matter experts that their content wasn't being lost, it was just going somewhere else or being consolidated or presented in a different way. So through creating and consistently referencing these inventories, I learned the importance of cataloging what you can while completing the project. So this is just a screenshot of one of the inventories, specifically the change inventory. So in the first column is the action. I used symbols and color coding so I could easily know what action was happening to each page. Then we have a column for title and then a column for URL of the pages as they existed at the start of the project. So what I ended up referring to as the old pages. And then we have two more columns with the page title and the URL of what was going to be happening. So the new pages, where that content was going. And then the last tool I'll talk about is feedback dashboards. Creating a feedback dashboard, which you'll see in the next slide, I do have screenshots of that as well, was a way to provide structure to feedback collection. I used Google Sheets to create mine. The dashboard was especially important and necessary as I had subject matter experts reviewing draft pages, content on the pages, and site navigation, all in a virtual format while competing priorities were happening and over an extended period of time. It was crucial to provide structure, because of the scale of the project. our website was going from about 150 pages down to about 50 pages. So this allowed subject matter experts to provide feedback when they were able to over a long period of time. And it also allowed me the ability to easily work my way through the changes that needed to be made and the feedback that was being provided. Through this feedback dashboard, I learned that it's very important to engage feedback early and often in your project, especially when you're working with subject matter experts or stakeholders. Not only is this helpful in completing the goal, but it really helps ensure buy-in and helps with change management as well. And also to structure the feedback collection from subject matter experts. Again, this allowed me to work through things in a stepwise fashion, but it also made it easier for those to take the time when they could to provide feedback because it was all organized for them and very specific. It wasn't just open-ended questions. So like I said, here are some screenshots of the feedback dashboard. In the background is kind of the home page of the dashboard where it lists the page name, who the testers will be, and then it links to the specific sheet where they'll be providing the feedback. And then it's the status of whether or not feedback on that page has been completed and done, and then my progress towards implementing the feedback. And then in the foreground is an example, a screenshot of a specific page where people would provide feedback. So at the top, it has the title of the page, and then it has some specific testing steps, like opening the page, scroll through the page and preview the layout, read all the content, including the accordions, and then click all of the links and buttons on the page. And then I also listed a desired outcome that I wanted people to see once they completed those steps. And then below is a space for that feedback where I ask for people to provide their name, the date they completed their feedback, the status of the feedback, whether they were still working through the page, and then the step or issue that they got stuck on, and then an open text area for them to describe further what their feedback was. All right, now I'll turn it over to Mahika.
Okay, so I'm going to be talking about these next 4 tools that I used more specifically in the homepage redesign part of this greater project. Something that I'd like to note is that when I started the project, Ellen said, okay, we're going to start completely from scratch. And I was like, great, I have no idea what goes on a homepage. And so these 4 tools are primarily data collection. And so one of my big points is that multiple sources of data is really important. And I want to preface these with that statement because you'll see as I go through them how they kind of build on top of each other. So I'll get into the first one, which was a student survey. Because I had no idea what to put on this homepage, I wanted to start with, well, what do people actually know about our office? And so I created a survey in Qualtrics and I sent it out through different email lists and through people I know to reach as many students as I could. And this survey was simply to figure out what students knew about our office. And then based on their experience, I asked a few different questions. So if they had used our services, I asked what they used, how their experience was, things like that. And then if they hadn't used them, I asked what they saw being the most helpful service to them in the future. And so with this survey, one of the big things that I took away was that understanding the audience perception of your office or your product can really help you determine the scope of your project. So in terms of this homepage redesign, because answers were pretty similar, regardless of whether or not students had used our office before, I took that to mean that any changes I made in the future should target both frequent and prospective users. And so more specifically, I wanted to make tabs that centralized and displayed our main services. And then also I wanted to minimize time sifting through other content for those users. Then the next piece of data that I used was this traffic tracking document. And this was actually created by one of my coworkers in student services. And it's a spreadsheet that we use every day in the office to track anyone that comes into the office. So it's all in-person traffic. We have the date, the time, who's visiting us, what the type of visit is, and that's kind of broken down into registrar's office, residency, credit evaluation, and then other offices, and then any other notes we have on their visit. And so from the traffic tracking document, I took away that in settings, especially with high traffic volumes, having a document like this can really help you monitor how your services are being used. And it might shed light on like greater patterns as you accumulate more data. And so specifically in terms of our homepage and our traffic tracking document, we found that there was a lot of traffic in our office asking about other offices or services we didn't provide. And so what I did then was I added an other resources section at the bottom of our homepage that has links to other offices in the division or just related offices to help students really find the information they're looking for. Okay, and then website analytics was really interesting. Ellen helped me a lot to learn how to use and interpret Google Analytics, which is what we use for our website. And so these are the numbers for the homepage specifically, and I want to focus on two of them, which is the average time on the page and the bounce rate. So the average time on the page was about a minute, and the average time on the site as a whole was about 3 minutes. And so that was a ratio that I wanted to keep because it told me that users are spending a little bit of time on the homepage and then going elsewhere to find what they were looking for. However, the bounce rate refers to the rate at which a user leaves a page without taking any action. And that's 52%, which is very large and also contradicts that initial ratio that I was talking about. So my goal here with the website analytics was to create a homepage that really helped users find the information that they were looking for. And so in general, website analytics, again, like the traffic tracking document, can really help you track and monitor how your services are being used, but also determine what is and maybe what isn't useful to your audience. And so looking at this bounce rate, it was clear that what we had on our homepage originally was not helpful to our audience. And so this, in combination with the other two pieces of data that I was just talking about, helped me to decide to really create quick links that lead to basically our top 9 services in the office. And that's like what is centralized there on the homepage. And then lastly, I thought it was really important to get staff input on this. And so anecdotal data is something that can really take quantitative data to the next level. And so here I just went around to the student staff, to the full-time staff, and I just asked people in conversation what they thought the most common request we got was. And it was the same thing, very consistent across sources. And something here that I found interesting was that all of these were functions that were available to students in their student center. So placing a transcript order, making a legal name change, requesting a verification letter, whether you know it or not, are all available to students in their student center. And so from staff anecdotes, something that was really important that I took away from this was that it can really not only further justify your project goals, but add to them as well. And so with this one, seeing that they were functions available in the student center, I really took that and I wanted to increase user autonomy with any changes I made on the website. And so again, that just created a stronger push to create a detailed overview of the services we provide and put them there for students to access on their own. So yeah. So with that, I just wanted to kind of summarize the big takeaways from this project. One was identifying your target audience and goals early, understanding that I wanted to create a product for students, really then directed my goals, and having those goals helped me justify any changes I was making throughout the process. Like I started with the power of multiple sources of data. I cannot emphasize that enough. It was so helpful to have multiple different sources and types of sources all saying the same thing, because when you're starting a project like this, especially in this case, when I was given a blank slate and Ellen said, make a homepage, it's very important to have those different pieces of data so that you can justify your choices and also make like educated decisions. And I think that that's very applicable to any type of project. And then lastly, the importance of student perspective. I'm obviously very, very lucky to have had the opportunity to work on this project and say that I got to do this. And I learned a lot, but I also think it's a great opportunity for the office to have a student working on such a project, because I was able to not only get the input of other students through my survey, but as a student myself, I was able to build a product for other students. And I think that that's very valuable. And I think that when you can, it's a good practice to put into place. So, yeah.
Lastly, we're just going to recap the lessons that we learned for you all. Be sure to formalize sideboards to justify decisions and say no. Catalog what you can while completing the project. Engage feedback early and often. Structure your feedback collection. Identify target audiences and goals early. The power of multiple sources of data, and the importance of the student perspective. So if you remember nothing else from our presentation, Mahika and I are each going to give you a tweet link takeaway so that you can remember these quips, if nothing else. So Mahika, if you want to go first.
Yeah, so my tweet link takeaway is impactful messaging 101. Identify your audience and elevate their voices. And I'll put that in the chat as well.
And mine is planning the project should take just as much time as completing the project. Take time at the start of your project to structure and plan your work. And now we have time for questions.
Thank you so much. That was really interesting. To kind of kick things off, you had mentioned that you had this written proposal. I was wondering how many levels of approval your proposal needed and about how long that took.
So I had 2 levels of approval. I worked with my direct supervisor to just ensure that everything that I had written was what would be needed at the higher level. So that was kind of less approval and more of a collaboration, but still a level I had to go through. And then the entire leadership team in our office, which consists of 3 levels of leadership, they all approved it at the same time. And that probably took just the approval part, not me drafting the proposal or anything. Probably took about a month because I wanted them to have time to really digest and provide feedback and make changes to the proposal or provide clarification. So that probably took about a month. And then I had to revise it and resend it in for final approval based off of some of the questions that they had, as well as the shift in work, because prior to the pandemic, the proposal was pretty open-ended because the project was going to be open-ended and much more of a full redesign rather than like a recycle of information and a restructure. And so then I kind of had to adjust the proposal a little bit to be more suited to the restructuring rather than the complete redesign.
Sure. And then I wanted to dig in a little bit more into the feedback dashboard. So I was wondering how that would work for a user who wants to provide feedback. So did you create a survey or a form for them to complete, or was it really completely open-ended where they could just provide comments on anything? I mean, anything about the particular topic.
Yeah, so everyone had access to that dashboard. If you were asked to test a page, you went into that spreadsheet and provided your feedback in. So everything was all in one location. I didn't want people to have to worry about utilizing multiple things. And then when it came to feedback regarding the content, since a lot of it, again, I was just reusing, I didn't anticipate a lot of feedback on the content, because on my part, it was mainly a copy and paste, and I was just putting things in a different order maybe, or it looked a different way. And so with that, I did have those specific steps that I laid out where I wanted them to go through the page in a certain way. But then when it came time to providing feedback on the actual content within the page, that was much more open-ended, and they just free-form text block or a cell in the spreadsheet provided their feedback. Again, knowing that it wasn't going to be a lot, because it was content that they had already provided or written or already existed on our website.
Got it. Does anyone else have any questions for Mahika or Ellen about this really fascinating project? I think you guys did an amazing job of covering your story. I think that's what that says. What was the ratio of time spent doing the actual website changes versus the overhead?
Oh, the actual website changes didn't take me that long. Again, especially since I was reusing content, so it was a lot of copy and paste. We also, because of the scale of this project and like the necessity for it, were granted a completely blank site from WhiskWeb. Our site is a WhiskWeb site. And so we had our active site, our now old site, completely available to the public. And then I was able to start from scratch on a completely blank one and build up from there. So that also made it easier and faster, because I wasn't having to make live changes incrementally. So I think the overhead and getting feedback collection and all of that probably took 8 months. And then the rest of the year was, and then, yeah, maybe like a month or 2 months, because there were competing priorities because it was COVID, of implementing the changes and then publishing them. And then a day to apply redirects once the site was published, and then another like week to communicate about the changes that were made and asking campus partners to update their websites with the links, but also reassuring that redirects had been applied.
So would you say it was maybe like 80 overhead, 20 website changes?
Yeah.
Something like that?
Yeah, that sounds right.
Awesome. Any additional questions before we wrap up today's session?
I'll quick pull up what our old website looked like so people can see what it was previously, with some
That's great.
tertiary menu structures. So then I encourage you all to go to the current Office of the Registrar website and see what that looks like.
Yep, it's definitely going back in the Wayback Machine, all those gigantic, long pull-down menus, hierarchies of information. Well, very well done on your project.
Thank you.
If there are any additional questions, I'm sure Ellen and Mahika would be happy to connect with you later on. And I want to invite you to join lots of other great sessions that are coming up. And we will see you again soon. So thank you very much for attending this session. And thanks again to Ellen and Mahika for presenting. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Thank you.